Well, I can just go ahead and tell this is Marilyn Eckerdt, and I'm down in Cridersville, and she's generously offered us many things from the old Eckerdt farm, Henry and Catherine Eckerdt farm, and she's going to tell us about a few of these items as we get them packed up. So what do you have there, Marilyn?
Well, as a kid, I remember this filled with milk from the cows. And but there were glasses that went with it, but the glasses have since been broken. But all the items I have from the kitchen are here, which aren't very many. And but they are the original items that came from the farm. Now, like these little cups, dessert cups, I know they're probably from the late 40s. This might even be Depression glass, but being they came from the farm, I kept them. And, oh, let's see what else we got here. Little candy dishes. That was quite popular, evidently, at the time. I don't know if they ever had any lids to them or not. When I've been in antique stores, I've looked at this stuff to see what what I can find out about some of them, if they have something a little bit different than what Grandma had there. This green seems to be real popular back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this, I'm not sure what it was. It was in Grandma's dresser in the bedroom. And I've asked different people, and the common consensus seems to be that it maybe held hat pins. I don't know.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah. And then, oh, this was a more modern deal, and yet primitive. Old, I would imagine it. Yeah, it still works, but it sure is awkward. The blue on the handle, I think, has to do with the time period that they were made in. A lot of kitchen utensils back then with the wood handles had different colors. And I don't even remember what other, I think there was a pink that they used. This is a jam jar. This strawberry, and jam was put in it.
Mm-hmm.
With a little spoon.
And when do you remember that being on the farm?
Oh, all from the time I was small.
Okay.
These are items I grew up from childhood seeing.
I see.
Yeah.
And when were you born?
1937. These glasses, and there were other ones, not just, these are circles. This size glass seemed to be really popular.
Oh.
Our glasses now are 8, 12, 16 ounces, and the glasses from there all seem to be about 6 ounces or so, I would think, when they were filled.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot more, but of course over the years they've got broke, because I used everything. These came out of my cupboards.
Oh.
I used everything. I used to have one of these setting out on a table, but this one set on the organ.
Oh.
It was the right size. Of course, they used lamps on the organ.
Well, maybe we'll be able to put that back on the organ someday.
they used the lamps, the oil lamps on the organ. And I do have one that I almost forgot about that I can grab, a little squatty one. Let's see, this is toothpick holder.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and here's some cookbooks from that period.
Okay.
How to can.
Yeah.
Of course, the measurements are not as precise as they are today, but these are could still be used.
Hmm.
This sat in the entrance, the back entrance, where the wash stand sat to wash up in the morning, and the men did their shaving.
And that was what that was for, was the shaving?
That's a straight edge.
Mm-hmm. Straight razor?
Uh-huh. I had two more with Henry Eckerdt engraved on them. My son has one of them, but I didn't know this when I kept all this stuff that was going to be going back. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I just loved it because I grew up with it all.
Yeah.
And you see these now replicas. They're little, some kind of bird, and they're needle nose scissors.
Huh.
I
Neat.
suppose they used them in anything that sewed. You had to get in there fine,
Yeah.
wise and clip.
Huh.
But you do see replicas of these nowadays. Of course, the metal's different type of metal.
Uh-huh.
And this was Catherine, my grandmother. This I found after she died. Now that was shiny yesterday or a couple days ago because I put polish on it, and just out in the air now a couple days it's dull.
What is it? Oh.
Very, very common
Oh.
for my time.
Uh-huh.
They're not diamonds, some kind of glass and sapphire thing.
So it's just a pin that you would wear.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
But it looked so pretty
Yeah.
the other day
Huh.
when I had it polished.
Huh. Looks pretty to me right now.
I think that's all I've got sitting out here.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
This plate is from Dumbrill, I believe is the name. They had a store, I think a dry goods store, in behind the Lutheran Church in Glen Arbor. And it says on here, it's hard to read because over the years they've been used and it washed off. Compliments of Dumbrill's, Glen Arbor, and 1913, I think is the date that's on it,
Huh.
in recognition of Wilbur's flight or
Yeah.
one of the brothers with the calendar.
I've heard about a Mr. Dumbrill who was the superintendent of schools that people in Port Oneida talked about quite a bit. Probably part of that family.
Yes, I would think so. And then this I don't believe is any value, although this type of was very popular. I never had to praise, but I don't think it's of any value. But these I used to keep in the secretary, or Grandma did, kept them in the secretary.
In the secretary desk, just as a
Yes.
decoration.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Because there's four or five shelves, and I think there's grooves in them. And
Well-
this, my mother used to tell me, Wallace's wife Marie, Wallace, my father, that they picked this up And, well, I don't know if they picked it up, but this was Niagara Falls before the falls fell. There was a large part of the falls that they say was more beautiful than the falls are today, and that's why at the bottom of the falls you got all this rock.
Huh.
Anyway, this picture shows the falls before this portion fell off.
Okay.
I guess that's all of the dishes.
What were you saying?
Oh, I wish I hadn't washed that plate so many times so I could read it better.
Oh well, you weren't thinking about
No.
preservation, you were thinking about life.
I stopped at Dumbrell's once, 10, 12, 15 years ago, and they still had the name Dumbrell on the store.
Oh yeah, I'll have to look for that.
As my recollection, which could be wrong, and then they took the name off or sold it or what. And it's not Dumbrell's, but it was Dumbrell's up in, oh gosh, 50s, 60s.
And you're thinking it was behind the Lutheran Church in Glen Arbor?
I think so. That's the main street, isn't it? I mean, other than the front street and behind. Well, anyway, the street where there was stores on.
Oh, the main drag there it was along?
Not out front, not the one that goes in behind the Lutheran Church.
Okay, yeah. Lake Street or
It
one of
goes
those.
north and south.
Yes, I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Yeah, my memory's pretty good with this stuff, but
Okay.
it was probably on a Friday or Saturday night. I don't know if it was every week or what, but there was a bar there in Maple City, and the men, including my dad, Wallace, would go in and the men would visit, and the ladies and children would stay outside and watch the free shows. I think the Three Stooges was probably the only one I remember that seeing there.
Yeah.
But of course everybody'd come with their cars, and we didn't park the cars side by side unless we were in a field, but it wasn't like a drive-in type of thing, you know, just the locals got together.
Mm-hmm.
Saw the free shows and just fun memories.
Yeah. Okay, what was the drink?
Kimmel.
Kimmel.
K, and it was spelt German-wise. I believe it was Kummel, and then there was a mark. There's a special name for a mark on top, like a dash, on top of this word Kimmel. And
Oh yeah.
it's German or Bohemian, but they sit there and play euchre and drink Kimmel. Oh, and I've tried to get Kimmel. I can't find it anyplace anymore. They used to sell it in Michigan up until about 25, 30 years ago. It was made out of caraway seed. But one of my cousins came by here some years ago, and she was so surprised because I had Kimmel. But I can't get it anymore. You can make it. It's funny how little things like that make such an imprint on you.
Mm-hmm.
Us kids gathering around the table, and when the cousins were there, which when my dad was up there was always company. Of course, whilst he was the only boy with 5 girls, and I hear tell he just teased the living daylights out of him.
Oh, yeah.
And always had him running and screaming. And I have a picture of him down in front of the chest there when he was 5 years old. They let the boys' hair grow until they were 5, and they started school. Then they cut their hair, and that is Wallace Eckerdt, and be about 1909 at 5 years old. I used to get a lot of laughs when I had company, and they'd say, well, who's that nice looking girl in that picture you got hanging on the wall? And I'd say, oh, that's my dad when he was a little girl. And they would look at me so funny. And what do you mean when he was a little girl? And you'd see a strange expression on their face. So then I'd explain to them that was very common. And here in England, I don't know about other European countries. Where the bathroom is now, in the farmhouse, used to be a small bedroom. And Joseph McCullough, Catherine's brother, my great uncle, that was his room after he was unable to care for himself anymore. And do you know where his house was?
Up near Travers Lake, possibly?
Lime Lake.
Okay.
As you take M22 and go past the cemetery, and the wood mill would been on the north side.
Novotny's Mill?
Yes, as you're heading east. And then there's a big curve, and where you can go on the road to go past Lime Lake, or the one that heads towards
Like Leland and stuff?
Yeah, in there. Fishing village. And he was right on the south side of that curve, just before you got to go by Lime Lake. And he had a farm there, and we'd go by there when we'd come up from Detroit. They'd stop at cousins and different friends if they were on the way, and we didn't know whether they'd make it up to the farm or not. And there'd be Uncle Joe every time. We must have left the same time of day, of course, same time of year when school was out. And there'd be Uncle Joe behind a hand plow with a horse, pulling this, holding it, I think he was keeping it from flopping to either side as he plowed, I'm not sure. But the plow wasn't very big, and the horse was pulling it, and then that was on the south side of the road. And there's a lake in behind where you go down to Lake Michigan now. By the cemetery there that heads down. Sheldon used to live right on one of those corners. And the Sheldon store. You knew about the Sheldon?
But you can tell me about it if you have something that you remember about it.
Oh, that was fun. We could go to Sheldon's, and Dad would get gas. And it had one of the old pumps that had the glass up here. And as kids, we were fascinated with this pump, of course.
High tech, huh?
You kids, get away from there. And it was a typical store, with long counter, and I don't remember too much about it, but we always got a piece of candy. And then Dad owned property on that road that went down to Lake Michigan there by Sheldon's, and it was on the east side of the road. I have to keep my directions straight here. And we'd go down in there and there was a creek.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, ice cold water.
Mm.
And we always had a cup with us. So we could drink water out of that creek. And then there's a lake behind there. I don't remember the name of that.
Sounds like Little Travers Lake.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And that, Dad would fish on that. And then sometimes he'd fish on the lake down below the dugout. That was an adventure.
Below which dugout? Oh, from Port Oneida, from your
Yes,
place.
the road.
Yeah, Shell Lake.
That road that went east, and then they built the boys' camp down someplace in
Mhm.
that area, because that was down, Lake Michigan was there, a little bit to the, I don't know if I got my directions right. Anyway, the dugout, I don't know who did that, and I'm sure it must have been done way back when, before cars, but Dad would take our 1940 Chevy down that road, and oh, was that scary.
Mm-hmm.
And go down there, and then the lake down in there, he'd fish at now and then. Well, one time, Dutch, you'll have to help me with the name, that was a neighbor of the Eckerdt farm there, right next door. Just
Howard Olson?
Just separated by the road. Was it Howard's? Was it Howard's or?
Howard Olson had that farm, the farm at, across Bash Road from your location
Okay.
at one point. There were others at other times.
Well, they were there, and they raised, I'm not sure what relationship he was, but they raised a boy, and I believe a family member, and we called him Dutch. Everybody called him Dutch.
Hmm.
And he was well known in with service community. This was latter years. He went in one of the services, and I do believe it's in that history book that I have of Midge's, Seville's, and became very well known in that area. He had so many inventions that the Army could use. He must have been in the Army, but one of the services he was in. And he wouldn't take money for it, I'm told, or we were told at that time.
Hmm.
That they really lucked out with his knowledge.
Hmm.
And then he built a home, and that home was almost next door to where my great-grandparents' log cabin was.
Mm-hmm.
That was taken down piece by piece and marked by the man who was building the boys' camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that after it was rebuilt is the one that is up, has been by the girls' camp Camp Kohan at one time. That they have moved it from place to place.
You're talking about the cabin that your great-grandparents had.
That long cabin.
Okay.
That could be on one of the land deeds that I have that I'm going to send with you back.
Hmm. I'll just interject. That's on that same what we call the George and Vina Olson farm. It's in that same area, but down a little bit closer towards Shell Lake. And there's a camp there called the Air Camp, which is for handicapped children.
But is that cabin still there?
It is now, yes.
Oh.
He moved it and marked the pieces and moved it and reconstructed it and refurbished it.
And he was going to, of course, he probably didn't display the deed in it or whatever it was, but I did give him probably in 60s, 70s, that to go with the cabin, so to speak. But yeah, that was my great-grandparents. And that was this south of the Schmidt farm a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And across the road.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And then it was in that area on the opposite side of the Schmidt farm there, the Dutch that I was talking about had built a nice home in there. And I was up there some years ago, but it's been 15 years or more. And the house was open, but nobody was there. You could tell they weren't afraid of burglars or anybody destroying anything, because the screen door, everything was open. And there's more about his family, Dutch's. My father told me, I should say Wallace, told me that Eckerdt Farm and then across the road there, that up in that area they think a meteor hit. I've wondered about it for years, that there was something special in that area. Also, it went as far as, the lady that had cottages off M22.
Stebner?
Was it Stebner? Yes, I believe it was.
By Lake Narada? A little bit?
Yes, I recognize that. Dad, and they would talk about the bottomless lake. It was right off M22 in that area to the north.
Mm-hmm.
And they told how different times they'd get all the rope or chains or anything they could to try and find the bottom of that. And they never could find how deep that was. And that's why they called it the bottomless lake. And of course, in that, I'm jumping around, but this
Yeah,
is
that's
just
fine.
coming to me that way.
Yeah.
About all the tin cans and jars, they think money was the men that never married, that ran the mill. I think it was the mill.
The Anderson brothers.
Yes, they hoarded their money.
Mm-hmm.
And they never had money, I guess, but they figured they had a lot of money with that mill.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was buried somewhere on that property. Now I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I know my father had wood cut down from the Eckerdt farm there, and they planed it, and then we took it back to Detroit where we lived at that time, and it's in a house that we had. It's the flooring that was upstairs in the girls' bedroom. Our bedroom, which that house is standing, and all the houses are gone around it for miles and miles and miles. But that house is still standing. They're going to use it as a information center.
This is in Detroit?
Mm-hmm. I've lived in some interesting places because I lived at on West 10th Street across from the what was the state hospital for some years, and that's the historic area. So I've lived in that historic area, and of course Grandma and Grandpa's farm.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, there I go again with the tears. And they were happy times. Oh, the company. It seemed that I know people say about their fathers and mothers, everybody loved them, but boy, my dad was, they couldn't get people in the church at Good Harbor Lutheran Church when he was buried. It's such a big funeral. Martinsons in Traverse City, of course Martinsons at that time seemed to bury everybody. And it just, because everybody knew my dad. Or the Eckerts, but Dad, for some reason, that being a boy, I think, made a difference.
Well, he was the only one in that family, wasn't he, with a bunch of sisters?
5 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
One was a half sister because Grandpa Henry was his name. His first wife died, and after she died, and that was one daughter. After she died and he married Catherine, then they had more girls. And of course they're all gone now, but not that many years, some of them. Now I'm in the next generation, the children of them. And I guess that's why time to give up my treasures. And
well, we sure appreciate it. We'll do our best to take good care of them and make it so people can enjoy and learn about your farm in Port Oneida for many years to come.
yes. Do you want me to go on?
Sure.
Of course, being that I hadn't planned on talking, I didn't have anything in order. But on the farm there, and behind the house was the milk house. And Dad built a lean-to on it where he kept his car, 40 Chevy. And when I was a kid, of course, eventually, 10 years later, he got a new car in the 50s. And in the milk house there was the separator that I remember Grandma using. Big old thing. Nobody knows what happened to it, and we think that after Grandpa died and Grandma was living there by herself before she had had any strokes, and there were people, it was starting to become tourist area. Raiders built there in Glen Arbor. Until then, there was just the diner and the grocery store, and you couldn't call it a hotel, and Reason rings a bell, but I'm not sure about that name. And some of my cousins, Dad's sister's girls, worked there, lived there.
Was that the Commandine, possibly?
The name's not familiar, but
okay.
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And, Grandma and Grandpa had raspberries. They had sandy soil, not far from the dunes. Wasn't the best soil, good for pigs, where you could feed them something else, which I remember. And but lots of raspberries. We had black raspberries, red raspberries, yellow raspberries. And they were out in behind the house and to the west of the milk house
Okay.
there. Then there was the John, the two-seater, and we were fancy, two or three-seater. We were fancy because we had toilet seats on the holes. And then over in the corner was a bucket of lime. And everybody was taught as a kid, if you went pooing there, you better get that coal shovel, small coal shovel, and cover that. Well,
Pardon?
Well, Audrey, my sister, and I and Dad were going down the dugout. I'm not sure what Dad went to the lake for, but every so often he'd go down there, I think before he went fishing, so, or maybe, no, he wouldn't have fished with us two girls not there. Anyway, we're partway down the dugout, and that is scary as all heck. And we get to the bottom, and there happened to be a tree nearby, and Dutch jumps out of the tree in front of the car. And I mean, it was safe. We were going slow, but scared. Oh, my sister was just petrified. Well, he kind of liked my sister.
Oh, so he was teasing? He jumped out of the
Yeah.
tree to give you a start?
Yeah, and we didn't know he was down there. And then after coming down that steep dugout,
Yeah.
is that dugout still there?
Yeah, yeah, it's a fun place to hike. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just chiseled into the hillside there.
yeah.
Yeah.
But with the cars, those big old cars, well, some are bigger than today's cars. They probably don't take cars down.
No, you can't take cars down it anymore.
But, oh, and we used to go swimming there on the road that went up to the camp.
Oh, Port Oneida Road
Yeah.
in Lake Michigan?
And it's like a cliff there that the public can go into.
Mhm.
And we used to have picnics up there with the Schmidts and different ones. And go down that steep bluff. Of course, we were kids. And go swimming there. My sister had a boyfriend at the time, and she was wearing his dog tags. And oh, she was crushed. She lost the dog tags
Oh,
at that beach down there.
oh.
And I believe there were pilings there. But,
Okay, the old Port Oneida dock?
yeah.
Hmm.
But,
Well,
I don't-
when you were young, I imagine they were there.
Yeah, but they were sparse and, you know, not much to them,
Hmm.
if I remember right.
Well, that sounds right, because the dock was torn out a long, long time ago. So it just would have been a little bit left when you were there.
The wool socks that I mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was to you for sure, but they're toe-in. You can tell they're a tight wool knit, and they came real high. And at the Coast Guard station there, where they went out on ice and were noted for going out if there was a ship in distress in that area in South Manitou Island. Well, I wore them for years before they perfected these wool socks, before they perfected snowmobile suits.
Oh, yeah.
And I really think they would like to have them
Yeah.
at the Coast Guard station and probably put them in some kind of a frame or something. I mean, we're talking, you know, they're this long.
Huh.
And it's just an interesting.
Yeah.
When my uncle was up there, Joe Bartnick. They had a house there, but I'm sure that you've heard that from the Bartnick's girls, from Alice Bartnick, one of their daughters.
I don't think I've met Alice, but I did meet a daughter of the Bartnicks who showed me around your farm some. But now are you talking about the Bartnick house at the Coast Guard station?
Yes, they lived in there.
Okay.
Because I can remember as a small child, us going there to that, to the house. And did someone tell you about where that dropped off? Of course, that's been, 50, 60 years ago. That part of the tip or something that went into the ocean, or into that lake, Michigan. Yeah, and I would imagine you probably have pretty much all of it from there. I kind of went blank.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that one, sir?
I'm sure I'm going to miss this.
These items?
Oh yes, I grew. Excuse me. Here comes the tears.
Okay. Well, that's fine. That's no problem.
I don't know why, but I seemed to be the one that valued that everything from that farm. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. It just maybe because I kept it, I could get rid of it, and yet I did get rid of a lot. Thinking but kept it in the family. Carolyn Seville. That isn't her married name, but of course she was the daughter of Alice Eckerdt Seville, my father's sister. And so her son now has some of the pieces. Big copper boiler, I think is what they called it. It stands about so high, you still see him around, with a lid with a black handle. And that was filled with water on wash day, which was collected on the front porch, and the rainwater was collected, and then it took 2 people to bring it in the house. And even at that, they probably emptied some of the water out to carry it. And then that was placed on a big, huge wood stove. And that's kind of a story there, because when I was there the day Dad and Catherine, his mother, my grandma, he decided to tear it out because they had electricity now, and my mother, before she moved up there to live from Detroit, her and Dad, that's where they lived, she wanted, she wasn't going to cook on no wood stove. Well, Grandma Eckerdt had a stroke that day. Excuse me. And I even took some medicine that the doctor had given me. So today, this is a reminder to me. Grandma had a stroke, moving all the precious items out of her home. She never knew if she was going to see them again. And here I am, 100 years later, and I'm feeling the same way. And took some medicine with the doctor's blessings. So I wouldn't have a stroke today, because I've had several so far. But it's amazing. You knew some of the people, but you think back as children and how you'd go in the parlor, which turned into a bedroom, and go in there and play the organ for hours. And they could shut the door, the adults could, and let the kids play. And where the side of the organ is quite rough is where it was sitting by a window and the rain came in. So one side of the organ is in very good shape. You know, everything you see is so old and there's so many memories. The cousins that came to visit, and you had to climb Tit Hill at least.
Climb what?
T-I-T,
Oh,
Tit Hill.
yes.
And at that time there was no vegetation on it. And of course that's what whoever named it was before my generation. Because of the shape of it. But you had to climb that every day, at least once. And we could see Lake Michigan.
Oh,
Oh, the back road, I forget what you call it now, that went through part, the swamp is down in there, that went over through the back road.
Kelder House Road?
It's the one, it's not the one that goes up and around through the camp, girls' camp.
Right, that's Bash Road.
Yeah. It was in front of the Eckerts,
Yeah.
in front of the farm, and cut through. And when it came out on the highway there, it was paved. I'm trying to think, was it an Olson or Kilder house, I think, lived on the corner there in that big white house.
Sounds like the William Kelder House farm you're talking
so.
about.
That my father got a few deer around that area. And his kids, boy, frogs. And the house has since been torn down, but where you entered that from the Eckerdt farm, and then just before you entered that, you say Kilder House?
Kelder House Road is the road in front of the Eckerdt farmhouse.
Yeah, okay. That went through to the highway.
Well, it went over to Port Oneida Road, and then Port Oneida Road goes down to the highway.
Does that go, which one goes to the girls' camp?
That would be Port Oneida Road also.
Well, that back road there by the swamp and that,
Yeah.
as you entered that from the Eckerdt farm, the Eckerdt farm came down and kind of like in an L, you know, and then out to the highway, M22. Well, when you went that way to Kelder houses, that's where Mary's house was. And I remember that as a child. We'd go visit Aunt Mary, that was Catherine's sister. And she also had a pump organ in there. And that's where Charlie Eckerdt, I don't know if Charlie lived there or not, but that would have been a relative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe Charlie might have been Mary's son.
That could be.
Yeah, and now I understand you're talking about what's now called Baker Road.
Oh.
Is the one that the George and Mary Eckerdt farm was on, which you're talking your Aunt Mary.
But that was right on the corner of where you went into south of the swamp there that cut over.
Yeah, well, from your farm, if you go down Kelder House Road a little bit to the west, then you get to Baker Road turning off to the right. Is that what you're talking about, possibly? A road that...
I thought it was kind of straight and
Okay.
then crooked, but yeah, Mary's house, Aunt Mary was right there.
And anything else that you remember about your Aunt Mary or her family would be very helpful, because I've never found anybody who could tell me very much about them.
We weren't real close to them. Um, and Donna, the daughter, her and I were pretty good friends when they were living not too far away, which I don't remember where it was. But, and last I heard Donna was still alive, but that could be 20 years ago or so, I'm not sure. And Charlie married Edith. Edith, when we travel from Detroit, our home in Detroit, and go up to Grandma's for the summer, first place we stopped in Traverse City by the railroad station. There were some houses there, and Edith and Charlie lived there, and Edith had a goiter. I don't know, maybe you don't want to hear this,
I
but
do.
she had a huge goiter from not getting enough iodine, in her system, and that's what happened, and where they started putting iodine in the salt. And every time we'd go up there, she'd be sitting on that front porch, and she was a good-sized woman. Oh, something else I remember. I went with my dad and Charlie to the cemetery. They dug up one of the children's graves. Now, the name of the cemetery, that's on M22, from the Eckerdt farm, M22, only a couple, 3 miles. And
On the right of M22 as you're
yes.
heading up that way? Yeah, that's the Cleveland Cemetery, Cleveland
yes,
Township.
Cleveland. And I have pictures of all the family graves in there. And at Cleveland Cemetery, the Catholics were buried on one side of the cemetery and everybody else on the other side. Well, we had to go there for them to dig up that child, and I don't remember why they dug up the grave. But Dad and Charlie, they showed it to me. It was just the 3 of us there. I don't remember now what it looked like, what kind of shape it was in. It just all seemed kind of gory to me, as a child. But there was some reason they had to dig that up and then rebury it.
Could they have moved it to where some of her relatives were?
No, they didn't move it. I think they reburied the child back in the same cemetery. I think there was some question about what it died of. I don't know. That's the only thing that comes to mind.
You don't know anybody who would know any more about that anymore, do you?
Well, there's surely some of the Eckerts around. I don't know if Donna's still alive. I think she was my age, or maybe a year or 2 difference one way or the other. She used to live up there in Traverse. We didn't see a whole lot of them. I'm not sure why, but I think Charlie was, I don't know if I should say this or not, was quite a drinker.
Well, I think that the whole story is good when we're doing history, if you're willing to share. That was part of life. We don't want a glossified
That's
picture.
true. And my mother, Marie Wallace's wife, brought us up very strict Lutheran. And we didn't look down on anybody, or I didn't look at it that way, but we didn't see as much of the family that were heavy drinkers or swore a lot. So I suppose that had something to do with it. When I was a child, my folks were visiting, they probably didn't want me hearing certain things that would happen so I guess you'd call it prejudice. But the one son was killed by lightning. But that, I believe, is in the history that Carolyn Seville, I'm pretty sure it's in that history. There was other unusual deaths, I believe, in that family with the boys, but I can't be sure, nothing positive. I just remember Edith Scoiter. And that big old train station, depot, that you looked on. The table.
This table here?
This table, oak table, which I've got loaded down with things here. You have a better picture of it than this, but with packing and all, things get messy. Had 2 or 3 leaves, which I'm unable to find here in my barn. And this table was used in the kitchen on a daily basis, and then the leaves were put in and it extended quite a long ways, and then it was used in the living room as a dining room. That's the room with the picture window. I feel kind of bad now that my father was put in that picture window, maybe in the 50s or so, because it's out of place, and I like original. Is this house that I'm in now is the same. We purchased it because it's like the farmhouse. And we made sure and replaced all the windows with the original long from floor to ceiling windows. And Dad put in that picture window, and although Grandma enjoyed it very much, I think Grandpa was dead then, but they'd sit in front of it and play cards and drink oh shoot, it's a bohemian drink.
Want me to pause?
Yeah.
Okay, here is a quilt. It's kind of rumpled up, but you get the idea. And you called this the Texas Star?
I was told, not by Grandma, but research since, that it was Texas Star. I had 2 of them, and they were both Texas Star. Well, the one that got burnt in the fire when we lived in Traverse City, this was solid. Where all these flowers are and that around the edge was solid, so that center was so beautiful, it stood out. And then this probably was, beautiful, and they didn't have enough solid material or something and used this. And
used what they had, huh?
Yeah, I didn't like it as well, and but I sewed hoops on it and hang it on a wall with a wood rod. So it's been hanging there collecting dust for quite a few years.
And your grandmother made this?
Well, the ladies got together.
Oh, okay.
I think. I think they had quilting bees.
Yeah. But it was your grandmother with the others? Is that the generation that we're talking about?
Yeah, Catherine, yeah.
And was this in the farmhouse?
Yes.
That you remember?
Yes, this was in there and used.
And how far back do you remember this going?
As a kid.
It was there when you were a kid?
As a kid, back in the 40s probably, is my best recollection of
And
40s on.
I guess you have no way of knowing how old it was at that time, whether it was new or old at that time?
I don't really know, but Grandma was up in years, getting up in years then.
Okay.
So I imagine it was probably getting pretty old. There
Uh-huh.
was a lot more quilts, but they disintegrated because they were made out of scraps of velvet and any materials. They really were quite ugly, and I had them. And when I went to take them out after packing them and moving, and they just kind of fell apart.
Are you saying that the quilts were ugly because they were old, or they were ugly from the start?
From the start, the everyday quilts, they didn't use, as a rule, I don't think the beautiful ones. Maybe if they had company, I don't know, that's just my idea, because what we used when we were kids upstairs were crappy looking.
They were just utilitarian, just for
Yes.
practical purposes.
Yes.
That's funny, because we think of the old-fashioned quilts as so beautiful, but you're saying that the everyday quilts that people made mostly for actual use weren't necessarily all that attractive.
No, they didn't have that much beautiful material.
Huh?
They probably cut up a nice winter coat that Grandma had or something, one of the kids, and that's what it looked like, a lot of the material, that they'd just take something heavy that maybe had been worn and stitched them together.
That's interesting.
But I sure enjoyed this hanging. Every time I went up and down the stairs in my home,
Yeah.
I saw it.
Yeah. And this is, you say they burned coal oil in a lamp like
I think
this?
that's what they called the oil, was coal oil.
Okay.
In the lamps. Oh, smelly. And this is coal oil in here. You can buy it in the stores today and it doesn't smell so bad. And this burns. Not clean at all. You can see where people gripe about the coal.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's, but it was, this is the one I told you that sat on the organ.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That particular
Yeah,
lamp.
this lamp did sit on the organ.
Okay.
Some lamps had more to them. They fit into something else and come down. But this one you can see on the bottom, the way it's fancy on the bottom, that this was meant to sit that way.
Okay. Okay. Where did you say this cup came from?
Ruby Schmidt gave me this cup. Their son, Edward, and I were married back in the 50s, 1954, 55, 54. And Ruby gave me that, and that was a baby cup, family baby cup they'd used on several of their children.
Huh.
And I think it's just so cute.
Yeah. She gave you that to use for your children?
Well, I didn't use it for the children. I used it to look at in
Okay.
a cabinet. But I thought it was awful pretty.
Yeah. Okay. And then this was...
This was Grandma's. I've got a feeling that it might have been a gift. I'm not sure where it, came from, but I do remember seeing it up there. And we called it the berry bowl.
Okay.
And then we had all the raspberries that they picked and sold at market there in Glen Arbor. I guess that's why I remember it was called the berry bowl.
Yeah. But this, so you would sell berries, but you also, when you would keep some for yourself in your home, you'd typically put them in that bowl to...
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think I explained the had three kind of berries: the black, the red, and the yellow. But you don't see the yellow ones very often.
No.
And the yellow one is tasty. My sister, 6 years older than I, she would pick berries, and I hated picking berries.
Huh.
So I was allowed to go in the house and clean, and the adults, others, picked the berries.
Uh-huh.
But I can't remember what they were sold for, but it seems to me 50 cents a quart and 35 for the yellow.